Thank you all for coming today. I hope this last panel will provide some interesting and robust discussion. You've met some of the panel. I'd like to invite Kate and James to come back and take a seat. And I'd also like to invite Dean Buchanan, Head of Entertainment at NZME, Leon Ratt, Head of Content at MediaWorks Radio, and Paul Spain, who's one of New Zealand's top technology business commentators, to join the panel. In terms of advertising, there's obviously been a lot of focus in recent years on video, but worldwide, audio channels and audio content is literally starting to make more noise. As the marketing people at Spotify pointed out in one of their early marketing moments campaigns, audio can be everywhere. Audio is evocative, audio is intimate, and audio enhances everyday moments in our lives. Around 25 to 30 million songs are streamed every day in New Zealand. Radio has around 86% of the population listening every day. The interest and talk around podcasts worldwide is growing, with over a third of Americans listening to a podcast at least once a month. Audio books are starting to replace those tattered paperbacks and Kindles for many of us. And around 20% of Americans own a smart speaker, and it's obviously one of the fastest growing consumer devices and will no doubt be one of the big gifts in New Zealand this Christmas. I saw something really interesting in some of the media emails I get the other day. In the UK recently, the Bauer Media Group started a new radio station called Scala. They've only been going about 9 weeks, I think, so there's no ratings in at this point. But one of the pieces of information they had, on day one, 10,000 people in the UK asked Alexa to play Scala for me. Wow. So this leads to my first question for the panel, and I'd like to start with you, Kate, if that's okay. You're all warmed up. Do you think with all these audio options, they will grow time, will they compete, or do you think they will grow time that people are consuming audio as a medium?
Yeah, you mean time in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is this mic working?
Yep, you're all mic.
Thanks. I think that one of the things we talk about a lot in the Alexa office is at the end of the day, you only do have so many hours in the day. So often we'll hear about we'll see some great new skill that's built for Alexa and it'll be really popular. But then another great thing will come along and you'll see that there's a shift in people sort of experimenting and playing around and trying out new things. But ultimately, I think it's like anything that it feels like customers land on what they want to do. And they sort of decide, well, I've got room for radio in my day, or I've got room for a podcast in my day, and they'll carve that time out. If the content's good enough, they'll carve it out. Otherwise, they're just experimenting and playing around with their new toy. So we're seeing really strong themes, with radio being one of them, where they're definitely doing radio all the time with Alexa, whereas you'll see other things that they're just playing around. Oh, I can play this game and it'll be really popular for a little while and then it'll taper off. And a lot of that is because keeping content fresh, as you guys all know, is so important, and a lot of the skills aren't keeping the content fresh all the time. They're just like great one-hit wonders. So they're great that one time you use them, but then the next time you know exactly what it does. Whereas they know if they ask for radio, they're going to get fresh content all the time. So, but still, we've only got so many hours in the day. So, yeah, there's a bind there all the time. Yeah.
James, we were very pleased to see in your presentation this morning that radio does have a future. Where do you think radio sits in this new landscape with the new audio players?
I mean, I think that radio has a tremendous opportunity because, anything that plays radio through a speaker, radio excels in. So I think from that point of view, smart speakers, anything that makes it easier to find a radio station other than learning a random number, which is the way that we tune into radio right now. Learning a random number is just a bizarre way of tuning into a radio station. And I think, it's interesting that I have smart speakers in my house. I don't actually have a radio anymore in my house because I'm now using smart speakers, and I've learnt the magic incantations to ask for the stations that I really like. And I think that changes the way that we consume radio to a degree, because I think that means that we are finding radio station brands that we know and that we recognize. So big radio station brands really can really benefit from this. And it's a case now of educating people as to how to listen, on their smart speaker, making sure that the incantation works the same on both Amazon Alexa and on Google Home is really important, because you don't want to confuse people. But assuming that you can actually do that, then actually, I think that smart speakers is a real great opportunity for where the future of radio is going.
Paul, you actually haven't had to do anything yet today. Do you think New Zealand's going to follow the trends that we've seen in the UK and the USA in terms of podcasting? And who do you think are going to be the drivers in terms of podcasting content in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, when I first got involved in podcasting about 8 years ago, it was because we didn't have much local content, and that's really what excites me, is we're seeing this big change where the mainstream media has really started stepping up in terms of producing content, and not just taking a bit of radio, slicing and dicing it up and throwing it out at the audience and hoping that it'll stick, but creating some really good, some really innovative content. So yeah, I think that is really helping the growth here locally. I'd like to see a little bit more in terms of data and stats that we don't have about the New Zealand audiences, but that's certainly starting to flow through, at least from varying media outlets.
Leon, where does podcasting sit in the media works?
Yeah, we're really just starting, to be honest. Podcasting as a content creator, podcasting allows you to get into an entirely new space, which is exciting. It's not the 3-minute, 4-minute, shut the hell up and play another song or a commercial break that our current talent are constricted by. So there's a great opportunity there. For us, it was about updating our Rover app so we can actually get out there and reach that audience, and also start delivering some of the statistics that you're talking about. We have to get the Alexa skills going and Google Home and everything else. But I think it's an amazing opportunity for traditional broadcasters to get into. We just have to start delivering content that people want to hear. It is a different space, though. It's not, again, it'll be a different type of content that we'll need to learn to deliver. And that's going to be a challenge for us, but again, it's extremely exciting.
Dean, looking at smart speakers and voice activation and what that means for content providers and advertisers, what do you think it's going to take to be a winner in this space?
And as James so wisely and eloquently put it this morning, the foundations of radio haven't in fact changed. Tech has changed. And as tech has changed, those foundations of radio actually become more important. And as we've seen through the tragic events in Christchurch, the importance of that one-to-one connection, trust, authenticity and realness and quality of content become all important. And that comes back to the quality of talent you have and how those podcasts and various forms of voice and audio are put together. So a lot of what we've learnt as radio broadcasters through the years is just applicable today as what it was when that dickwack from 1899 said it wouldn't last.
Kate, you're obviously sitting in the smart speaker space. What do you think it's going to take for advertisers and media owners to be winners?
I always think it comes back to the quality of the content at the end of the day. I mean, we're putting smart speakers into people's hands. They're going to have them in more rooms of the home. So that opens up an opportunity for your content to be probably more accessible than it's ever been before. But ultimately, smart speakers will live and die, like any technology, on the quality of the content. So if the radio industry is producing good podcast content, great streaming content, you've got every chance of being one of the most frequently listened to things via smart speakers. If it's not good content, have a guess what? People won't listen to it. So it's pretty simple, really. Content is still king. This is just a new device and a new way of accessing the content.
Paul, we're all obviously watching technology with great interest and a lot of focus on AI at the moment. What do you think that the more connected car is going to mean for the likes of the radio industry and Spotify?
I like to sort of look a little bit further out on this one. I envisaged a bit of a future where our assistants, the Alexas, and so on of this world will do a lot more, maybe personalisation for us. So the way I sort of picture it is looking ahead a few years. When I jump into my vehicle to commute to work, possibly that'll be an autonomous vehicle, but the AI will know a lot more about me. So it'll have a feeling of what my day is going to look like, what do I need to do to be prepared for the day. So it might give me a little bit of a prod, a reminder of things that are on my to-do list, other bits and pieces where its intelligence kicks in. Maybe it'll pull out some content that's going to help me be successful with my day and push that ahead of maybe my favourite things, pull in news, other content. So I think there's a potential for a really personalised experience that could be in the car, that could be sitting on a bus. But I think we've certainly got some interesting change ahead as the technology develops, as AI gets to be more personalised and to understand us a bit more deeply.
James, obviously a lot of radio listening is done in the car. Do you think the connected car could be the final video that kills the radio star?
I mean, I think certainly the connected car will change things, but as I think we know from both the US's experience with connected cars and with new ways of broadcasting radio, and indeed the UK's, we know that that change is very, very slow. And it will take many years to actually see a sensible amount of change in terms of the stuff that we listen to in a car. Having said that, I mean, I listen to a fair amount of podcasts. Obviously, I would, because I'm writing a thing every day about podcasting, and I listen to a wide variety of that as well as radio, in my car. And I would only assume that more people will get used to consuming more and different types of content in their car in the future, yeah.
Leon, as a content maker, what audio content do you think people are going to be consuming most of in the next 5 years?
What they want to listen to. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but in reality, it's going to be whatever's important to them, whatever's interesting to them, whatever they find entertaining. That's what they're going to want to listen to. Whether it's listening to talk radio, where it's a great, invigorated conversation, or Hosking saying something to piss someone off, and then, or in fact, it's just the basics, which is your news and your weather. Those sorts of things which people just want to be connected to, and you can never get past that. And you're right, something like Christchurch, Dean, is, we saw an incredible amount of listening through that period of time and a real change in the way people consume behaviour. So it's really driven out of need, that basic sort of human need of what do I want right now. And for sometimes I just want something which is actually going to relax me. Sometimes I want something which is going to invigorate me. So I think from a content creator's perspective, we need to make sure that we're going to be there providing whatever particular mood that you're wanting to service at that time. From a commercial perspective, we're going to have some commercials around it as well, and that's a real challenge. There's no doubt about that.
Paul, where do you see growth in terms of different kinds of audio content in the next couple of years?
I would agree, but I guess I see it as the technology continues to grow, it makes it easier for us to be less tied to particular mediums and to particular broadcasters. So today I think we're probably in terms of our radio listening, it's quite common to be stuck to a particular channel. And that's something that I think opens up. In Kate's example of wanting to listen in on the sport, and whoever was broadcasting it was right at the bottom. And so we'll come down to that content that's most relevant to individuals, getting that more personalised experience. For me, I listen to a lot of audio books now. That's not something that I did 10 years ago, but that's part of my listening habits. And so, the radio has to compete with these other things. I don't think radio's going anywhere at all. But we might divide up how we listen a little bit differently. If the content's compelling enough, then people will also find more time to listen. So I'll often be seen walking around a supermarket or another place with earbuds in, which I didn't used to do, because I've got something I'm really keen to listen to.
Dean, where do you see that the best opportunities are for advertisers? We obviously have a lot of media agencies in the room today. In terms of audio, where's there going to be the great opportunities in the next couple of years?
Well, Leon touched on it before. The thing we're most excited about podcasting is there are no rules. In a broadcast environment, there are 60 minutes in an hour and 24 hours in a day, as Kate mentioned.
And the BSA.
and the BSA, who we love dearly, Leon. Where in podcasting, there are no rules. It does come back to quality of content. And interestingly, that shared experience point that James was talking about before. And we're doing a lot in the news, sport and entertainment podcasting space right now. An interesting story from an agency perspective is we had Bond's underwear approach us recently. They love the Girls on Top podcast, which has a moderate audience and stars 3 of our NZME stars. What they wanted was to integrate positive body image for women into the podcast as part of the content. They weren't interested in proudly brought to you by Bond's underwear. Insert strapline here. They actually wanted to have a real conversation with real women, which led to the 3 of them actually having a lingerie photo shoot and to actually hosting an event with farmers. They were ecstatic about the response. It wasn't about ratings or cost per thousands. It was about having a real conversation with real women that led to real results. And it was difficult to price from our perspective. The interesting thing from a broadcasting perspective was they were wrapped with the price tag because in their minds they could access an audience that they found was difficult in a traditional broadcast environment. The power of the traditional broadcast environment, however, was to use our AM and FM, our newspapers and our digital assets to drive listeners to the podcast. And so that total environment is what worked for them. So I think it's a really exciting future for us. But what it comes back to is what does the advertiser need and what's the connection point with the potential buyers or listeners. So again, I think that's really exciting for the future of broadcasting and radio.
And James, you obviously see a lot of the content ideas that are happening internationally. What about in terms of audio opportunities with advertisers? Are you seeing people try new things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you were saying, the opportunities that you have when you use the very intimate media that podcasting is alongside the mass market media that radio is a tremendous opportunity. And there are, examples from all over the world of radio stations who are doing things that they can't really do on the radio. Mm-hmm. They're doing those on podcasting, instead. So Nova Entertainment, for example, is doing a podcast all about wine. Now, that's not necessarily something that they would have put on the air, half an hour of somebody talking about wine, but they're working with a wine retailer, and the way that they are driving audiences to the podcast is they are also promoting it on the radio stations as well. So actually that's something that pure play podcasters can't do. And so being able to use both of those at once, is a really important thing. And you've then got, examples such as Colgate toothpaste in the US are doing an Alexa skill where it will tell you a story that is a long enough story for your kids to brush their teeth to, which is a really nice bit of, branded content that uses the smart speaker in your bathroom, and my child has a smart speaker in her bathroom and she loves it, to actually do a very important tool, which is, to get them to actually clean their teeth properly. So, I think that there are all kinds of opportunities with much of this new technology.
That example is actually Oral-B. It's an Oral-B
Oral-B,
example.
there you go, you see, so it's clearly worked.
But it is, well, I think it is clearly working. It's an easy mistake to make. Yeah. But the skill is called the Chomper skill, and it was a bit of original content. So the content creator had the idea, and then they went to the toothpaste brand and said, would you like to sponsor it? Yeah. So I think the opportunity for us to think about is like, what kind of rich content can you develop that's so useful that you can reverse it the other way, instead of looking at starting with a sponsor and trying to come up with the content. What's a content idea, and can you go in the other direction? Yeah. I really like that example. I use it a lot. The skill's available in New Zealand as well for Alexa users. Look up Chompers if you want to check it out.
For some reason, when we were putting together the agenda, Ali and I wrote down would make fake news one of the subjects of the panel. It just doesn't seem relevant today, but I guess it does actually open up a wider conversation about trust and how much it matters that people get content from brands they trust. Dean? One
Which
you
one?
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, it's going to be one after
Well,
the other.
look,
Dean,
of
Leon.
course, it's in today's, I suppose, era of fake news and, what's happening in terms of Facebook and so forth, it's very important that people are finding areas and places where they can actually find news that they trust. No different on our radio stations or your radio stations, and journalists are very, very keen to make sure that they don't stuff up and broadcast something or publish something which is wrong. So I think it is going to be really important and certainly going to be a basis of how we want to do broadcasting going forward. But in saying that, people will also they will trust people often more so than corporations, which we're also seeing as well. So, and that's where probably, our own personalities or just individuals are going to have to be really careful about how they then present, what they see or they, as a news or a view, is going to be really important as well going forward. Because I think that, brands can be broken or created on that word trust. So I think it's going to be highly a really important thing for people to understand when they're going into that space.
Dean, in terms of both consumers and advertisers, how important do you think that trust is?
Absolutely fundamental to the media landscape in New Zealand. And again, if you allow me to hark back to Christchurch, I think what we saw post the event was the outrage from Kiwis on how long it took Facebook to even engage with the allegations about what they did with the video. It was days and weeks. Yet in radio, we were dealing with the event in seconds and minutes. And I think the way the radio industry handled it in New Zealand was amazing. There was no rumour, there was no speculation. It was handled with facts and listeners live to air. And then post the event, you have that human interaction on the emotion and empathy and just the shock and outrage, all those emotions which radio portrays so very, very well. And then if you extrapolate that out a little bit longer and have a scientific look at the launch of Premium in the New Zealand Herald, what we're seeing with the users with Premium is they are 3 times more engaged on the Premium stories than what they are with commodity everyday use you can get everywhere. And that's based on trust and reporting around facts and opinion, I should say. So I think trust is fundamental. The Americans call it the Trump bump. It's the reason why newspapers are doing well around the world when everyone else predicted they would come down, because they're not trusting what they're seeing on social media. And I saw a great study by New Zealand On Air about 12 months ago, just how well the traditional platforms, television in New Zealand, radio and newspapers sit on that trust index. So it's fundamental moving forward, I think, that trust and authenticity are at the basis of how we create our content.
Second to last question for the panel. Paul, looking at technology as it relates to audio, what changes do you see ahead that advertisers need to be most cognizant of or have the most opportunity to engage with?
Well, we're starting to see in the New Zealand market this access to advertising that is dynamically inserted into content a lot more, and of course radio has done in a simpler way with network stations for many years. But this will take it more and more granular as time goes on, which I think is important for advertisers. I would imagine that we will see this increase through the owned channels like Rover and iHeartRadio, where they've got more and more granular data as well. So that's very interesting. The other technology, I guess, enabled aspect is that podcasts are able to be produced, media is able to be produced by anybody today. So that creates some opportunities from an advertising perspective to hit niche audiences, although the measurement around that content is often quite different. So there's some opportunities there, but it needs to be navigated with some thought and how to leverage these really valuable niche audiences.
Kate, in terms of Amazon, what advice or what guidance are you giving advertisers in terms of what they need to be most conscious of?
I think if you're looking at sort of experimenting around the custom skills that I was talking about, one of the advantages that gives you is that you can put your own analytics on the back of that skill. So then you can learn, and it's very much a test and learn environment at the moment. I mean, this category's only been around for a small amount of time, but you can layer it with all the expertise that you have in your industry. But I would encourage you that whatever you build, build some analytics into it as well, so that you can tweak it as you go and understand what about this medium is working for you. I think you might be surprised at how the medium behaves on a smart speaker compared to some of the other platforms you may be using. So analytics is still incredibly important. Yeah, and experiment and test and learn and start small in this space as well and build.
Last question to Leon, I've done it again, Leon and Dean and Leon. What changes do you see ahead in terms of news and entertainment?
More competition. I would like to think there's a whole new range of talent coming through, because I think talent is the lifeblood of our industry. Securing the future of journalism, I think, is incredibly important. Back to that point on trust and authenticity. It's been really interesting to watch the Twitterati react to the Herald Premium, and they conveniently forget the fact they've been paying for the Herald for 150 years. They're paying for Spotify and paying for Netflix, but when it comes to paying for journalism, there's this perceived issue. So I think we'll see that change moving forward. But again, I think it comes back to great talent, creating great content that interacts with both advertisers and audiences. So I think being in the media is the best job right now anywhere in the world. Better than politics.
Definitely better than politics. Yeah, I agree. Look, at the end of the day, it's cliche, but content is always going to be the king. I mean, it's going to be the most important part. I think for traditional broadcasters, it's now going to be about making sure that we're available everywhere, which the consumer will be. And that's going to be important because technology continues to move at such a pace. And financially, it's a real struggle probably for traditional broadcasters to continue piling money into areas which aren't necessarily paying back immediately, but it doesn't matter. We have to be there. The ambiguity of how our content is going to be consumed now is just going to absolutely define who we are. So we have to be wherever they are, wherever the consumer is. And certainly the advertisers want us to be there too, hopefully.
I'd like to thank you all for your time and insights today. I'd like you to join me in thanking the speakers and the panellists.